welcome to this week's RYA Club Zone and podcast. This week you'll have seen I've switched the contact lenses for glasses as we talk the serious business of AGMs, and in particular what we can deliver throughout all the different phases of lockdown and the different tiers that we're currently living in. So first up, I'm going to be talking to Mandy Peters, our legal advisor, who's going to talk us through some of the technicalities of the AGMs. And then we're going to hear from Ian from Delft Sailing Club, who ran their AGM back in March, and then he subsequently ran one for his class association later in the year. So first of all, we'll welcome Mandy. Hi Mandy, how are you doing?
Hi Adam, yeah, I'm good, thank you very much.
So first of all, my first question is how do clubs check if their constitution obliges them to run an AGM?
Well, Adam, this should be a really easy one to answer. It should be as simple as going to a club's governing documents, be that a constitution or articles of association, and reading through it. And there should be a provision within that constitution or articles that says the club shall hold an AGM. If there isn't anything there, it means they don't have to.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Mandy. So is it possible to run an AGM face-to-face in all of the different tiers?
Well, look, we think it is possible based on our interpretation of the legislation. We think it is possible because there is a exemption in each regulation that's in force for each of the three tiers that allows people to meet together physically for the purposes of work or voluntary or charitable services. So we take the view that that includes clubs, charitable or voluntary run clubs, and that means that they can hold physical meetings. However, obviously such meetings would need to be in a COVID secure location and adhere to social distancing measures. The added factor with this now is one has to take into consideration the government guidance of travel between the three tiers. So it may be possible to hold face-to-face meetings in tier 1 and tier 2, but perhaps not possible based on the travel guidelines in tier 3. And a club will have to factor people coming in and out of each tier to go to the club. So whilst it is feasibly still possible, our strong advice is that wherever it's possible, we suggest that clubs hold these meetings virtually. It's the most suitable approach, particularly in this ever-changing landscape. And I think the reality is lots of clubs have got used to holding meetings virtually. Lots of their members will be used to having Zoom meetings or Zoom social meetings with family and friends, etc. So it's perhaps easier to hold them virtually now than it was a few months ago. And my advice as well is that, you know, this thing is going to go on for, I mean, none of us know, but it's here for the foreseeable future. So the sooner we all get virtually meeting fit, the easier it is for us all going forward.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Mandy. So what about a virtual AGM? Can clubs run these, or does it depend on their constitution?
Well, Adam, clubs should check their governing documents initially to see if there are any restrictions on them running virtual AGMs. Outright restrictions are unlikely, but it may be that the governing documents stipulate the place of the meeting. And if they do, that indicates that the meeting should be held physically. Other governing documents will be silent on the issue. If you are a club that is unincorporated and your governing document, i.e. your constitution, states that the meetings need to be face-to-face, really you should gain approval from members to run a virtual meeting in advance of that meeting. And if every member buys into that, then you can go ahead and run that meeting. If you are incorporated as a company, perhaps limited by guarantee, or a charity, then you can rely on the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act 2020, which was brought in this year to provide for organisations holding AGMs during the pandemic. And this allows companies and charities to run AGMs with more flexibility, notwithstanding the requirements laid out in their governing documents. There aren't similar provisions for unincorporated associations because unincorporated associations are governed by common law and not by statute. But what we say is that the principles laid out in the Act for companies and charities are likely to apply for unincorporated associations.
Perfect, thanks, Mandy. So if the Constitution says they can't run virtual AGMs, can they simply change the Constitution?
Yes, Adam, clubs can change their constitution, but a rule change does usually require a 2/3 majority vote, and that may be difficult to achieve in the current climate. So, as we said earlier, if you're a company or a charity, then you can rely on the Corporate Insolvency and Governance Act and have more flexibility regardless of what your governing documents say. If you're an unincorporated club, then ideally you'll ask your members to agree to holding it virtually regardless of what your constitution says.
Thanks for that, Mandy. That was really useful. If anyone wants more guidance on this topic, please do go onto the RYA website where we've got more information available. Now though, we're going to hear from Ian from Delft Sailing Club. They were one of the first clubs to run their virtual AGM back in March, and he also helped run a AGM for his class association over the summer. So welcome, Ian.
Hello, Adam.
Hiya. So first of all, why did you decide to host your AGM online?
Well, we were right in the crux of the storm in March. We had a committee meeting on the 16th of March, and the country was shutting down around us. People had been told to work from home, and it was clear something was really happening to the country. And I said, we really need to put proxy voting in place online, because normally it's a piece of paper sort of thing. And I went home and started to work on that. And each day it was clear the situation was developing. Our AGM was scheduled for Friday the 20th. And by the time the AGM should have been held, the pubs were shutting, the leisure centres were shutting, and the country was going into lockdown. So that was basically the background to where this all came from.
Perfect. So what did you have to check before doing it?
Well, I came home from the committee meeting and I reread our articles of association to see what our obligations were. We had to hold it within 15 months of the previous one, but with them being written up in 1962, it didn't preclude online voting or anything like that, because obviously it didn't exist. So then I rang Mandy Peters to say, this is what we're planning to do. We're planning to put in proxy voting, but it could end up being the entire AGM. Would that suffice? Would it discharge what we need to do to continue for another year? She said it probably would, given the situation, being unprecedented times. So yeah, go for it, because it's really your only option with what's happening. So we did.
Perfect. So what exactly did you do, and what tools did you use?
Well, I've never done anything like this before. I didn't know what was out there, but I thought somebody somewhere must have online voting systems. And when you Google it, lots came up. I had a quick check of some, I read some reviews, and we decided to use a system called Election Buddy because it had good reviews. It seemed to be quite simple. It had a free trial system up to 20 voters. It's for free anyway, but you can trial it perpetually on 5 voters. It's fully auditable. You get sent a key that only the person with the key can vote. You can't share it, so it's very secure, and you publish the results to the web. So I made a very basic template, and I got people to test it on phones, tablets, PCs to see if there's any issues on different formats. I tested it with a few directors who were not very technically savvy, and everyone came back and said this was dead easy, dead straightforward, and sort of a joy to use. So then at this point, people could still visit other people's homes. So the secretary came to my house, we looked at the last AGM, and I replicated it digitally with reports built in. You click on it and you read the Treasurer's report, the accounts, the Commodore's report, the Bosun's report, all the stuff you would normally see. And then we built the real thing, tested it with some more directors to say, right, this is the real thing, can you test it and let us know if there's any issues? And they all came back and went, that was dead easy, dead straightforward. So then I imported the email addresses of all eligible voters. And by this point, it was becoming clear the real AGM wasn't going to happen. So we ran it for 48 hours. And in that time, people could email us with any sort of queries. And it concluded at 7:30 on the Friday with everyone at the club who could have voted had a chance to vote. And many more than half of them did.
Perfect. Just Just remind me of the standard. So it's Member Mojo that you used. I know there's loads of ones out
We
there.
use Member Mojo to run our club software, but this system is called Election Buddy that we use to run the digital AGM, and it's free for up to 5 voters to test, and it's free to run for up to 20 voters if you've got a very small association, and then it's a tiered pricing structure. So I think, off the top of my head, it was something like $16 to run our AGM, which in the scheme of things is nothing really for the democratic exercise. We probably spend more on powering the club and heating, to run the real AGM.
Yeah, perfect. No, yeah, Member Mojo's one I'd not heard of until I saw you using it actually. An Election Buddy, as I say, I've heard more about that in the last few months, but I know there are different ones out there.
Well, the good thing with it,
sorry,
the good thing to mention is it's ultimately configurable to anything you want. We did it as a show of hands. So do you pass the directors, yes or no, or abstain? But you can configure it in any form of voting you want. So if you've got very peculiar ways of working at your club, you can probably replicate it in Election Buddy, and it's so flexible in terms of how the voting structure can be configured.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Ian. So what was the impact of the AGM online?
Well, as you can imagine, at most small clubs, our members live over quite a wide demographic area from both coasts of the country, really. So our turnouts, usually 20 to 30 people, and these are usually the kind of people who are really heavily involved in the running of the club, the flag officers or previous commodores or people who've got a real interest. And we don't tend to get the fringe members. By running it online, the demographic obviously expanded. We had members who live in Florida and come back for the summer and live on the south coast. They could vote. And it was about 60% of eligible voters actually took part in it, which is a far better turnout and gave us a far bigger mandate than we would normally get from a show of hands in the clubhouse. And also, it's a bigger cross-section. People didn't have childcare issues. They can just nip on and vote because it was open for such a large window. And everything was passed. We had a few abstentions, but they were mainly where people had maybe a conflict of interest, so that's what you'd normally expect. And we think we're going to keep it in place for all proxy voting. Hopefully we can have a real AGM next year, but if we can't, we can just duplicate and amend, but we can certainly use it for all proxy voting in future.
Perfect. No, and I know you are a keen miracle sailor, and I've gone on to do your class association one in a similar way. So probably my final question is, what lessons did you learn, and what would you advise other clubs from what you've done so far?
Well, first of all, and this is the big one, check your rules of association. Go onto the RYA website. Mandy Peters was very useful to me in that week, but we were both thinking on our feet at that time. Now she's had time to consider it, and she's got lots of advice as to what you should and shouldn't do and how to do this sort of thing. So that's filled out a lot more. We were like going, oh God, how do we do this? But now that's been clarified. The miracle one, we concluded it with a Zoom meeting. Obviously, Zoom, I'd not really heard of it back in March. Now I'm on it all the time for all our kind of meetings. And what we're doing now is now kind of the norm, but it was all a bit new to us. So the miracle one, we did the same kind of thing. And once the vote had concluded, we had a Zoom, we read out the results, and then it was any other business. Has anyone got anything to add? Anything we should be thinking about, could be doing? And we had a good sort of half-hour long chat about the association, which was nice. So that was quite different to Delphon. We didn't have that sort of wrap-up. We just voted, published it online, sent an email to all members with the results and put it on the Facebook page, and then carried on COVID planning and closing the club down.
Yeah, no, perfect. No, thanks for that, Ian. And I think just to finish up then, just a big thanks from me, because I know you've gone on to sort of help and advise different clubs that have had questions throughout the year. As I know you were one of the first clubs to do it this way. So I know, for myself and the team, it's big thanks from us. And I know a lot of clubs across the country will be appreciating the advice and input that you've had so far.
No, it's not a problem. And the beauty of this system is, if anybody gets in touch with me and says, we want to do the same thing, how does it work? I can just duplicate one of my AGMs, put in 3 or 4 email addresses, open a window of 24 hours, and all of that takes me less than 5 minutes, send it off, and they can have a good poke around and go, is this fit for our club? It's not a hassle for me to do that. What I'm not really prepared to do is build it all from scratch for you, but I'm happy to give you a bit of advice and go, here, have a test of this. Is this what the kind of system you should be doing? That's no problem at all, and I'm more than willing to help. Like I've done about 6 or 9 clubs I've helped out this year. No problem at all doing that.
Perfect. Well, everyone, heard it here. If you need any help, drop a message at the RYA and we'll put you in touch with at Delft Sailing Club. So no, thanks a lot for your time, Ian. And
no problem at all.
See you on the water soon, hopefully.
Cheers, Adam. Thank you.
Cheers, Ian. So that's it for this week. Thanks for listening. A big thanks to Mandy and Ian for coming speaking today. And like we've said throughout this, if you want more information on this topic, please do go onto the RYA website where we've got the latest guidance. And finally from me, just good luck in winning your AGMs, whether they be face-to-face or virtual. Thanks everyone.